I came from down Illinois, and I was the outdoor editor of the Chicago Daily News. And I came up to northern Minnesota to do some stories. And finally, I kept going back and forth through Ely, and I said, why am I going back to Chicago? And one day I didn't go back. And I've been here ever since. I would have been here quicker, but I didn't know Ely was here.
Hi, my name is Stuart Osthoff, and it's a pleasure to talk to my friend Bob Cary today. I think of him as Mr. Ely. Bob has done so much for Ely, the Ely area, over the years. Through his writing, he's written, I guess, 5 books now, 6 books, and of course his weekly column in the paper. I've always enjoyed it, along with so many other people, your writing. But beyond that, it's a pleasure to talk to you because you've done a lot of good for my business, writing for my magazine. And I always like to talk about sled dogs. I never get my fill of that. So that's going to be the focus of this talk, because his latest book is called Born to Pull. And it's about sled dog racing and all the people that get involved in raising and training and running dogs, whether it's for racing or just for the fun of it. I'm a racer, so I come to it from that angle. But I know a lot of people just hook up the family pet and go on skis down the lake and have a good time doing that.
Oh, yeah. This sled dog country, Stu.
It sure is. I mean, if you want to run sled dogs, you've got great snow conditions here. I like running up here because I go traveling a lot, and I usually have an advantage in terms of training. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, you know, back when we had the All-American sled dog races in Ely, it was when I first met you and Michelle. And Michelle was running dogs when she was real young. I don't know, she was just
about 12, I think.
Yeah, she was just a kid in school.
And many of her friends, I mean, there was like 20 other kids, classmates that ran as well.
And so that sled dogging kind of became a way of life up here for a lot of people, and particularly you folks that stayed with it. They stayed with the racing, you know.
Yeah. There's not as many of us left anymore. In fact, one of those people she raced against ended up being her sister-in-law. And so it's a small world.
Well, who was that?
Mardi Gras.
Oh, sure.
So,
oh, for heaven's sake.
The first question, Bob, I wanted to ask you is where the idea for Born to Pull came from.
Okay, well, this has been kind of kicking around the back of my head for a number of years. But what happened, it was kind of a backdoor thing. Gail de Marcken, who did the watercolors for the book.
Which are beautiful.
Very fine watercolors.
As a racer, I think it's the finest artwork I've seen on sled dog.
Excellent. And Gail had been trying for a long time to get some kind of a book with her illustrations in it. She went down to Pfeiffer Hamilton, which is the publisher of some of my other books in Duluth, and they took a look at this and said, well, she had some other things in there, but they said, do some sled dogs, because they're involved with the Bear Grease, which is, you know, the North Shore race, the marathon up there.
Right.
And so she came back up here to Ely, because she and her husband have a summer home on Bear Island Lake. And she came back up and spent some time sketching and filming sled dogs in and around Ely, and then did some watercolors and took them back down. Well, Don Tubasing, who is the publisher, called me and said, I've got this woman, Gail de Marcken here, who's got some, what I think are great sled dog paintings, and we're looking for somebody to put a book together we can use the paintings in. And would you be interested? Well, Stu, you know, over the years, I've done a lot of my own illustrations.
Yeah, you're an
so
excellent artist.
I'm not really too interested in promoting somebody else's artwork. And I said, geez, I don't know, Don. And he said, well, will you look at them? I said, well, okay. So Gail drove up, came in the Echo, and laid the portfolio out. I just took one look, and I picked up the phone. I said, Don, when do we get this thing underway?
They're that good.
Oh,
I
yeah,
agree.
they are. And I wanted to be part of that book. And that's how that thing went.
The book was published for release at Christmas in 1998. Now that you've had a chance to go on the road and promote it and plug it a little, what has been the response by the general public to the book, first of all? And second of all, do you have a sense of this fascination with sled dogs amongst the public? What is that? Where does that come from?
I don't know. You know, this is kind of a mystery, Stu. This book has taken off. It's in the second printing. It's a regional bestseller. It's now out east. We had a crew from CBS come from New York and did a half-hour show, and about blew us away. They ran that twice out there. They ran it the first time, and there was so much interest in the sled dogs, they ran it the next day again in a morning show. So, yeah, it's amazing how this thing has got a life of its own. But the thing is, I'm not really a musher, and you know that. I've run a few dogs.
We might find that out today.
I'm not a musher.
We run a few dogs.
But I do know mushers. And so, well, you remember when I started doing this over a year ago, and I talked to you and Michelle. We spent a lot of time going over the training of the dogs and how you got into it and racing. And then I interviewed something like 36 different mushers.
Really?
In fact, I did enough interviews, twice as many as they could use. I could probably do a whole nother book.
Yeah, everybody has their own tales to tell.
Well,
that's for sure.
and they're fascinating.
They really are.
The things that happen and how they happen, and so.
But you did do a good job in the book of capturing the essence. I mean, like you say, you can't tell it all, but it's a great start for people that have that casual interest in the sport. And maybe they're never going to actually get on the runners, but it tells them, you know, if they go to a race, now they know what's going on, or if they want to maybe get more intimate with it, they can maybe sign up for a trip like one into the Boundary Waters, a touring operation. There's a lot of that going on now. There's maybe 10 or 12 companies running trips in the BWCA where you can basically do like a canoe trip, only you're with sled dogs and skis, and you don't have to go all that far to get a real wilderness solitude experience in the winter.
They're going right now. There's a number of them out now, and the thing there, this is an interesting thing too, because people have asked me about this, and people can come up here to Ely or over at Gunflint, Grand Marais, and you can go for a half a day or a full day, or several days overnight, any way you want to do it. And these mushers are good at their thing. They take all the gear in. I was up 2 years ago up on Ashib, camped out up there in a nice tent, had a wood stove in there.
That's the way I like to travel.
It was, you know,
none of this sleeping in a snow cave.
Easy living, you know. And with the dog team, you can haul all kinds of goodies in and live quite well. So that's going on. And one of the interesting things, of course, is how people get into this. Over the course of some 40 book signings around, well, all the way from here to Chicago, I've talked to a lot of people, and particularly kids, who say, our family's got a sled dog and a sled, and we're just going to have 1 or 2 dogs. I said, well, that's nice. Well, you know how that works. There is no way you're going to have 1 or 2 dogs. You get into sled dogs, and you've got to have more. The next thing you're racing, and the next thing you got a lot of them.
Yeah, it's very hard to have a litter and not have a second litter, because they're charmers. They're excited to go because they know that I've got a leash and they're going to go running, but little do they know only the puppies are going to run for this little deal. These 2 rows are all males, so that they can play with each other and socialize and get used to each other, so when I put them in a team side by side, they already know who they're with. So most of the teams are set up so that they run and live with the same dog and really know every, thing about them. So you've got to be careful that the males can't reach the females for obvious reasons. But they're just going crazy now because Michelle's out here, and she never comes out here unless it's time to run. Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, I've raced dogs for 15 years now, probably trained 400 dogs. I've won dozens of races, but I still, myself, have a hard time articulating why it is that I do this. I mean, you can sit back and say, you know, pragmatically, you certainly don't do it for the money.
Nope.
You certainly, you know, don't do it for the fame because it's an obscure sport. I mean, very few races even make the media these days. There's some other reason that captivates a musher and hooks them into that sport and holds them there. I mean, I think Michelle and I have talked since we had kids many times about, you know, we got to think about wrapping this up, but we can't sever that tie. And there's, you know, I've tried at length to figure out what it is for me as a sprint racer, but I know people that run long distance, mid distance, all these other forms of sled dog activity. I find they have a hard time explaining why it is that, you know, the sport holds them so. So I was wondering if in all these interviews you found that other people had the same problem that I
did. That thread
do.
is through the whole thing.
Okay.
And it's the kind of the glue that holds it together. Every one of them says the same thing, every musher. And you know all the mushers, and they're all different. They're all individuals, just like the dogs are. But there is a mysticism involved here, or a sort of a spiritualism that's involved. And I've only run dogs a few times, but I can sense it. I can feel it. There is a connection between the humans and the dogs. It goes back thousands of years. I think it's in our genes. And we've had this connection with the dogs. And with sled dogs particularly, where your only control is with your voice. You are...
There's this illusion that you're controlling the team. But they're in control. Your life is literally in their hands when you're bouncing through the woods at 20 miles an hour. You want them to think you're in control, but the reality is you're depending on them and your training of them.
But there is a fascination, and I've had several mushers articulate that on a moonlight night or even during the day in the sunlight when they're alone and they're just going down the trail, and it's the silence, the solitude, just the sound of the runners and the dogs panting and maybe yipping a little bit once in a while. Usually they don't do much when they're running. But there's one of them told me the dogs will take you to the edge of a place that you've never been before. And you all of a sudden sense something here that is unique. There is no other thing on earth like this anywhere.
And likewise with no other activity. I love to hunt, fish, canoe, camp, you know, do the wilderness, all of that, but there's something different. And I even have bird dogs. I've trained a lot of good bird dogs and horses. I mean, we've trained other animals. To me, I think it's this teamwork concept too, where you have to have all these dogs working together as a unit, especially to win a race, for example. But it's that harmony and that teamwork concept that kind of elevates it above raising one dog or one horse.
Oh yeah, and it's the interesting thing is the public. I want the public to understand what is involved with this, and how these dogs are all great athletes of their own. They're just as good athletes as Michael Jordan or any of these other basketball or football athletes or anything else. And the musher knows all of his team members intimately, just like a coach knows all the players. And they're all different, and they know each one, their strength, their weaknesses, where they fit best into the team, and they're watching all the time, the pups coming up, which is going to be the next lead dog, and they're working constantly with those dogs.
Another dog that's trained can teach a dog way more than I can. So what the puppies do is they run with adult dogs all the time. So it's asking a lot out of a 9-month-old dog to lead. But yet, if you give them a chance to fail when they're young, that's really a good thing, because then, you know, if they can work their way through that stage at that level, then they're usually home free. If I was to hook an older leader in front of them, they'd all go perfect. As a musher, you're actually a player, a veterinarian, a coach. You know, you're everything, but you're really a motivator. You have to train the dogs and prepare them to race, but you know, that motivation, that mental thing of keeping them happy, that's a big part of it too. I don't use anything I train with to race with. Every line, every harness, every sled, everything is, you know, there's a training set and a racing set. You train all year for, you know, a few, 8 or 10 weekends, and you can't afford to have equipment problems when you got all that other stuff to worry about. So many times, just not paying attention to your equipment is the start of disaster. Talk a little bit more about this bond that the dogs and the mushers establish as they learn to trust each other.
That's a thing that people don't understand, because you know, it's G and haw for right and left, and you know, easy, on by when you're going to pass. There's whoa when you hope they're going to stop, but there's you're dealing with dogs that are individuals, and the dogs know a lot. Mary Lambert tells an interesting story of being up on, I don't know, it was the Kuskokwim River, one of those places up in Alaska, early on when she was just starting to race. And she was in a short race up there. It was, well, not too short, I guess probably 40, 50 miles. And the race, it was in spring, and the race started on one side of the river and finished on the other side. Well, she knew that she had to cross over, so every time they came to an ice bridge, because it was spring and the river was opening up, she would holler, haw, and the dogs ignored her. And kept going, and they come to another ice bridge, she hollered, haw, and the dogs ignored her. All of a sudden, they cut across one of the ice bridges. Team behind her broke through, where the guy forced the dogs to go across. Now, she said the dogs know stuff we don't know. They knew where the good ice was.
There's millions of years of evolution in there that they've learned that stuff.
And she said also the dogs know if you don't know anything. And the dogs look back and they say, this musher is an amateur and doesn't know anything, so we'll take care of her.
They absolutely do sense uncertainty in your voice.
Sure.
No question about that.
They know whether you got it or not. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. The dogs are great, and the dog stories, I love to sit around with mushers going back to George Adela and Jerry Riley and some of those greats
from the Ely days.
That, you know, came down from Alaska, and the stories they winged, you know, it just
ready, guys?
blow you away.
Let's go. Hey, all right. Hey, yeah.
I guess, you know, sled dog racing, if you're watching it as a spectator, doesn't have the action and the drama that, you know, some other spectator sports do. But when you're when you're involved as a musher or a handler, and you've invested this tremendous amount of time and energy and money and sacrifice into this team.
Yeah.
All the little things that, you know, determine the outcome of a race or whatever. Those are the details that you have to sweat and dream about and fret over. Where do the mushers that you've talked to, what rewards come back to them from making all that sacrifice? I mean, what are they really? What is the upside of running dogs to them? I mean, what are some examples that people gave for that? I mean, we know the sacrifice. What's the reward?
There's a feeling of accomplishment. There's a exultation when the thing is going right. When you know your team is going, you know you're going to win the darn thing, or you're going to be up in the front couple. And there's that it's just like a team that's coming down the wire, a basketball team. And you got a couple of guys in there that you know are going to hit those three-pointers right at the end.
Yeah.
And they do.
In the clutch.
Boom. Yeah, and you know you got it. And
I have literally been reduced to tears when my team gives me more than I thought they even had.
Sure.
I mean, just think about that concept. A dog running to the, you know, edge of exhaustion, you know, not over the edge, but giving you everything he has. that kind of trust and faithfulness, that's, I think, the remarkable, magical thing about it for me. I can literally almost cry when they do everything that I've asked and more.
All right, ready? Start. Get up, hike. Hike, hike. Let's go.
Made it good up to there.
Whoa! I think it's
So, Bob, what do you think about your first sled dog ride in 12 years?
It was a gas, really.
Still got the touch. You didn't lose them.
Well, no, I didn't get dunked, but my hat blew off halfway around. I reached up and grabbed that and threw it in the, well, there isn't any basket there, but I threw it on the sled. And then when I came in, I couldn't find the brake. I was hunting for the brake pedal. Ran right into the whole works coming in.
Well, I know the dogs enjoyed it, and I hope you did too.
Oh, it was great.
All right.
It's something you don't want to hang around too much, because the next thing you want to go out and buy some dogs and a sled. So.
And it's all downhill then.
Yeah.
I wanted to, just jump topics a minute and talk a little bit about some of the other books that you've written. I know the sled dog book is a little bit out of the theme of your other books. Let's just grab a couple of them here. I think this was the one previous to Born to Pull, the root beer lady, the story of Dorothy Moulter.
That's taken off and gone about the 6th printing now. That's the story of our neighbor up there on Knife Lake, who lived for half a century alone. And of course, she died in '86, but Dorothy's still a living legend to most of us.
She certainly is. Many, in my business, I talked to many people that, visited her over the years, and that remains a highlight of their trips up here.
Oh, Bob Jacobson, I think it was, the old game warden, that died this year. He told me, you go past Dorothy's Island up there at Isle of Pines, and of course her cabin's gone, everything's gone. There's only just a little plaque there, and Dorothy's dead. But Bob said, you go by there in the early morning when there's a mist coming off the lake, and if you look real close, you see that old bent lady getting a bucket of water out of the lake, and she'll say, come on in and have some coffee.
She was always
She's still there.
Willing to invite you in for a snack. And then this book, Tales from JACKPINE, Bob, kind of a collection of your interesting outdoor encounters over the years, huh?
Oh, it's kind of touched bases on the outdoors as far as my life went. And up until a few years ago, 46 years, I canoed with my wife, Lil, and we did a lot of things together, and that's what that book mainly is about. Lil died 6 years ago. We went on canoe trips and went ski racing with Bob and Edith Sommer for years, and they're neighbors over on the Moose Lake Road. And then Bob Sommer died a few years ago. And it took me a couple years to figure that out. Edith and I got married last year, and so
that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah,
story.
and we're still ski racing.
I guess
and
you're
still
going to
going.
have to write another chapter or two.
Yeah.
And then was this your first book, the Wilderness Canoe Manual?
Right.
What's that basically about?
Well, that was a book to kind of give the basics on canoeing up in this country, essentially, and to try to dispel some of the myths. It's like, I grew up with the thing, big man, big paddle, cover big water fast, until I was in a canoe race and watched two small guys with short paddles wipe everybody out. And Gene Jensen and Buzzy Peterson. And those guys, when they were cleaning up everything in North America, and they're still going. Those guys are still going. My goodness, and they're up in their 60s. But I had Gene Jensen wrote the paddle chapter for me, and told how to select a paddle. The paddle, when you think about it, the only thing that's important to paddle is the distance between your hands.
Right.
And I grew up with that great big paddle and fooey. Well, I learned a lot from watching him and listening to him.
I know a lot of people that have read that have learned a lot about canoe camping too. Just so we can wrap this up, I know our time is running out.
Sure.
It was a pleasure to talk to you today. I finally got to do something for you after all these years of helping me out. I can call this guy up anytime and get an article for the magazine, and it's always a good one.
Stu,
I really appreciate all you've done for not only myself, but the Ely area, the Boundary Waters, and now sled dogging, which is my next love. So, you know, thanks a lot.
It's been a two-way street, and you people have sure been good to me over the years. I appreciate it.
Dave Backus did a real fine biography on Sig Olson, along with the Olson family. And we learned a lot about Sig we didn't know. We didn't know that all the years that he was a school teacher and a dean at the community college, he hated his job. And he loved the outdoors, and he kept trying to find some way to get out of the school teaching business so he could do what he loved. And he finally did. He finally got to writing books and got out of there. But he was a very complex person. The last, I think it was the year before Sig died, we had lunch out at the Boy Scout base, and Sig said something. We were talking about threats to the wilderness, and he said acid rain is probably the biggest threat the wilderness will ever see, at least at that time. Yeah. And that hasn't changed any.
Hi, I'm Stu Osthoff. This is my wife, Michelle, and our latest little baby, Taryn. We're the publishers of Boundary Waters Journal, which is a magazine about the BWCA, Quetico, and surrounding Superior National Forest. It's a wilderness, recreation, conservation, and nature magazine, kind of all blended to one. It's 10 years old, and people from all over the country like to subscribe to it because this is such a popular wilderness canoeing area, and we have in-depth articles in there in a quarterly magazine about fishing, camping, canoeing, history, regional lifestyles, wildlife, everything that people come here to enjoy this area about. So whatever you're into, we cover it, but it's all focused on the Boundary Waters region. Okay, I'm the publisher, and what I do is keep a constant rapport with freelance writers and photographers so that we have good material to publish. And so I get manuscripts submitted, and I go over them and decide and select which ones are going to appear. So when the issue time comes around, I have a pile of typed in to the computer articles, a pile of photos and a pile of ads, and I put it all together and I give it to her in a paper mock-up, and you can tell them what you do with it.
I do after Stu's done with the layout, then I do the computer work and get everything ready, and then in the magazine I also take care of the books and basically pay the writers and photographers so Stu can keep a good rapport with them.
The magazine is really built around our lifestyle, which includes racing sled dogs, so we spend a lot of time with the dogs during this time of the year, from basically October till March. I'm pretty much full-time musher. It doesn't pay as well as the magazine, but it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of challenge, and it's exciting.
Charles Perrault said he owned the radio station here in Ely, and he cut some promotional tapes for the radio station, and one of them, he comes on and he says, "This is the end of the road up here at Ely, Minnesota, one of the 2 best places in the world, and we're still looking for the other one."